How's it going, everybody? My name is Marco Viella. I am the lead pool inspector here with the city of Wichita. In this presentation, I'll be going over how to maintain a pool either in semi-public or public in accordance with the city guidelines. In the presentation, we'll be going over pool operator responsibilities, disinfection, such as the type of disinfectants, water balance and volumetric calculations, facility maintenance, aquatic risks, good pool operating practices, pool water illnesses, non-fecal and fecal-related involvement accidents, pool record maintenance requirements, city inspections, reasons for closure, and then city statistics from last year. So for your pool operator responsibilities, the general obviously is to maintain the water quality and chemical balance. This should be done whether you're at the facility or not. You should put enough in there to where the water is balanced out, whether someone gets in it or not. And then the pool operator will also maintain facilities and their mechanical system and components. And they will also need to understand the needs of facility maintenance and identify and evaluate aquatic risks. When disinfecting, the first thing you need to know is the type of facility that you have, whether is it a pool, is it a spa, is it a therapy, or is it like a splash pad or a water feature. The next thing you need to know is it an indoor or an outdoor pool. There's a big difference between the both because outdoor are usually harder to maintain because you have the elements such as wind, rain, and anything that can be blown into the pool, which are weather. And then indoor is a lot more kind of controllable because you have walls and perimeter around that. But disinfection overall is pretty much the process of destroying or inactivating pathogens, which include bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites, and algae, which are important to make sure the public is properly protected from any of that in the water. The type of facility, like I mentioned earlier, that will determine the degree of how hard it will be to disinfect that body of water. Like I mentioned earlier, if it's outdoors, it's going to be harder because of how the elements can interact with it and change up the chemicals in there and the chemical balances. Whether the indoor will be a little bit more easier to maintain, but at the end of the day, it all also kind of comes down to the amounts of use that it has. Sunlight exposure can also break down the disinfectant. In general, the outside facilities will require more disinfectant than indoor, especially if the use is equivalent or greater than, because the sun eats the disinfectant. Bathing loads, water temperature, and source water will also influence the amount of disinfectant used. For the types of disinfectants, we'll be going over that shortly, so just bear with me. But when you're doing disinfectants, no matter what type of disinfectant you decide to use, you must remember that it's very important that you take care of where it is located and where you store them. Some chemicals, especially chlorine, can become less potent over time as the chlorine off gases from the solid tablets, and then the chlorine tablets and powders stored on shelves for more than a year are usually much less potent than ones that are just brand new, freshly bought. But in general, you and the pool manager should know the codes and regulations associated with the safety and maintenance of the pools. When talking about disinfectant, now we'll actually get to the types of disinfectant. The most popular are chlorine and bromine. And then there's also briquettes, which is the chlorine feeder, granular, or gas. Talking about disinfectants, these should be monitored at least once a day, if not as much as possible, several times throughout the day. You should use a colorimetric test that utilizes color matching for testing PDP or free residential disinfectant, which that marks the amount of disinfectant in your water that is just floating around. When you're trying to test this out, try to go as deep in the water as 18 inches from the water line away from the sides when testing the water. That way you get like an accurate measure, more precise than what's on top. And then other methods for testing this type of disinfectant include triometric or electronic testing. So when testing with free chlorine, it's important to keep in mind that the amount of chlorine in your swimming pool is the right amount to sanitize the water. And then when using a chlorine-based sanitizing agent dissolves in the water, hydrochloric acid is formed. Whenever you're regulating the pools, we try to make sure that the pools must stay between 1 parts per million and 5 parts per million. And the amount of spas wading pools and water features stay between 2 to 5 parts per million. And the pH must also be no less than 7 and no more than 8 for all bodies of water, no matter if it's a spa or a swimming pool or a water feature. And then finally, the total alkalinity for all shall be between 80 and 180 parts per million. Now that you kind of saw that there's chlorine and bromine as the most popular ones, we're going to talk a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages of each one, starting with chlorine. Some of the advantages of chlorine is that it's widely more available and it's also cheaper, as it's 40% cheaper to buy compared to bromine. It can also be stabilized from the sun with cyanuric acid. And then finally, there's just a higher percentage of available sanitizer for the whole body of water. However, some disadvantages of it is that it's very ineffective of high pH levels above 7.8. It also needs to be constantly tested and replenished more regularly as the sun and other outside factors eat up the chlorine, such as body oils and things of that nature. Now, when we talk about bromine, it has a low pH of around 4, and so when you use bromine tablets, it will slowly lower the pH and alkalinity over time, requiring the base chemical to raise the pH and alkalinity. The same can be seen for the chlorine tablets too, which have an even lower pH of around 3. When we talk about bromine, in the sunny outside pool, it may burn off quickly since bromine is not stabilized from the sun in the same way as chlorine, which is why bromine is usually typically used for indoor pools. And we've seen that they usually use bromine for the indoor facilities that are really pretty much open all year long and that have popular use, such as spas. Some pool operators enjoy the reduced effect of disinfectant byproducts, including bromamines, indoor pools that use chlorine, because they may find it necessary to frequently shock the pool to reduce the chloramine levels, which can foul the air and cause corrosion to metal items around the pool, which is why they use sometimes bromine as well. Bromine is also known to have a less potent smell than chlorine, even when bromine is combined with ammonia or nitrogen. Combined with bromine or brominates also remain a viable sanitizer, so whenever that is combined with that. A popular question, since chlorine can be stabilized, can bromine be stabilized? Bromine can traditionally not be stabilized or protected from the sun. And another question we often get is, will bromine bleach swimsuits or clothes? That is, yeah, it can bleach it, but not to the same degree as chlorine. Since bromine is less active than chlorine, and even though the levels of the bromine may be higher, the bleaching effect on swimsuits and skin irritation is generally less. So now when we get down to the bare advantages of bromine, like I said, it's more stable at higher temperatures than chlorine, which is why a lot of people use it as in the spas, because the spas can get up to 100 plus degrees. It's also more potent at higher pH levels than chlorine. And then bromine can also be reactivated by superchlorinating, which is super cool. And then bromines are still active sanitizers with low odor, which that's better than chlorine. As you know, chlorine, some of you that operate the pools, if you go back into the pump room, you just smell the chlorine right away. The bromine, it's not as harsh, and you don't smell it as bad. However, the disadvantages of it is that, mentioned with the chlorine, is that bromine is 40% more expensive than chlorine. Bromine is also not widely available as chlorine, so it could be harder to locate bromine. And then also bromine is not as effectively stabilized from the sun. And then some other ways of disinfecting your pools is another popular is salt water or chlorine generation. Salt water is used to chlorinate the Cl2 with the addition of sodium chloride to the water that passes through an electrical chemical cell and generates the free chlorine, which is the disinfectant in the pool. This method, when you use salt water, you're still using the chlorine as a disinfectant. It's just produced in a different way. So therefore, no matter, we had a lot of problems last year where people would be like, oh, well, it's a saltwater pool. Even if it was a different type of salt water and then not straight chlorine, that's what we held it to the same degree, because at the end of the day, it's the same thing. And then you also have the ozone water treatment, which is a very powerful oxidizer and sanitizer. It destroys anything it comes in contact with, faster and more effective than anything else readily available. And then when the sanitization is complete, or if the ozone finds nothing to oxidize, it returns to molecular oxygen. And this happens in two methods. In the UV method, air is passed over a UV bulb and the radiation creates nitrogen, oxygen, and then ozone. And then the molecules are introduced into the water where they can do their thing. And then the second way this can happen is in the corona discharge method. It's called the corona discharge method. And this happens when the small lightning storm is created in an air-filled chamber. And then from there, the tiny bolts inside the chamber creates the O3, which is then diffused into the water by an injection fitting or manifold. However, problems can still occur. Since the ozone has just a short lifespan, it's generally more effective in spas, as it can be more effectively distributed due to the smaller body of water. However, the ozone is not as effective on algae or bottled acidide or potassium tetrachloride, if for those trying to be chlorine-free. Overall, us at the city use is a free/available disinfectant kit at every inspection. Whenever a question you should ask is when deciding what disinfectant to use or change to, you should always ask what type of equipment, training, storage, cost, and liability do each have when trying to choose a method to disinfect your pool. So now we're going to talk about water balance. Having proper balanced water creates an environment that optimizes for the disinfectant process. Having the water balance levels off can create such a sharp turn within a couple minutes of just adding the disinfectant. So how do we make sure that the water is properly balanced? To determine whether it's a pool or a spa or any water is properly balanced, a full chemistry analysis is necessary. This includes calculating the saturation index, or SI for short. The saturation index is a method of determining whether the water will deposit calcium carbonate or maintain it in solution. The ideal range for balanced water is between -0.3 and 0.3. How can you get this water balance reading? You can take a water sample straight to Leslie's and they'll take a full water analysis for you. So we're going to talk a little bit more about pH. The control of pH is very important for the comfort of users, the effectiveness of the disinfectant, and the protection of the pool system components. An ideal, specifically a real good ideal range, is anywhere between 7.4 and 7.6. If it's above 8, you're going to hit a more basic type of water concentration, which inhibits and deters the disinfectant effectiveness. It also can clog filters, it can disturb heating elements, and it can cause circulation problems, which can then cause cloudy water. This also allows bacteria to hide and surfaces to become not disinfected, which can also cause irritation on the skin. If it's below 7, that means your water concentration is more acidic, which then creates corrosive waters, which can then attach surfaces. The pH can also affect the disinfectant's ability to kill the bacteria. So it's important to have the pH in the whatever disinfectant you're using within the specific and codes range. That way they both can work the best for the protection of those in the water. So now we're going to finally talk about the third component, the third chemical, which is alkalinity. The total alkalinity is a buffer in the measure of the ability of the water to resist the changes in the pH, which then the pH creates the perfect water balance for the disinfectant to be very effective. So the total alkalinity is basically like an anchor to keeping the pH where it should be. The ideal range for total alkalinity is between 80 and 120. However, 80 through 180 is allowed. A lot of the pool inspection violations come straight from the total alkalinity. Yes, it does count you against a violation. If it is outside of 80 through 180 parts per million, then it will count as a violation. So it's a good rule of thumb is like if your pH is off, generally your total alkalinity is off since it's a buffer for the pH. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about total hardness with the calcium hardness, the temperature, and the water balance. So total hardness is the sum of calcium and magnesium dissolved in the water. In spas, the easiest way to treat this is with H2O replacement. So you can drop out of the solution easily and it's less soluble with a temperature increase. A water softener may also reduce hardness, so if it's the calcium's too hard, you can use that to reduce it. A sequestering agent may also help prevent scale, which is the chelating agent. And then adding calcium in products may cause the water to boil, so make sure you read the labels before you add anything into the body of water. The ideal range for this is between 200 parts per million and 200 to 400 parts per million. And then CaCl2 is used to increase the calcium hardness. When talking about spas in particular, the maximum amount of temperature is 104 as seen in the presentation here. Any spa that is over 104 will be shut down unless it is adjusted on site. So if you don't have anyone on site to adjust it and there's people in it, we're gonna close it down. We're gonna get them out because temperatures higher than that generally are tough on the skin, and if you're in there for long enough, it will start to do some damage. So now the next important thing, now you've chosen your disinfectant and you kind of know what to get your levels at, the next important thing is the volume of your pool. You have to know the volume of your pool because it determines how much disinfectant, sodium acid, sodium bicarbonate, and then sodium carbonate, and etc. All these other chemicals, it determines how much you have to add in when adjusting your levels. The volumes are put into pump rooms. Houses are not always right, so make sure you specifically know the calculation of your pool. So the first tip is to calculate the surface area when trying to find the total volume of your pool. As you can see here, presented on the slide, it kind of shows you how. For example, for this rectangular, you take your surface area, which is the length times width. However, if it's like a circular pool, or any type of water surface that's circular, you would take the circle surface area, which is 3.14 times the radius of pi. And that's how you would find that out. And then to find how many gallons are in the pool, you would take that surface area and you would times it by the average depth and then times 7.5. And then that's how you find your total surface area and then how many gallons your pool or spa or feature is. So here's an example of how to recalculate the surface of an area of a pool. If you want to, we can walk this through real quick. The area of the rectangle, you see the length of it is 5 and the width of it is 3. So you take those, 5 times 3 is 15. That's your surface area. So when finding the surface area of a multi-sided pool, for example, here we have a diagram. There's 3 different parts of this pool, right? There's part A, which is both 10 feet in length and width. And so you take 10 times 10, and that's 100 feet of just part A. And then you go down to part B, and you see that it's 25 feet in width and then 20 feet length, because it's basically double area A of the pool. So then you do 20 times 25 feet, and you get 500 feet. And then for the smaller part of the pool, part C, you see that it's 5 and 5, so just 25 feet. And then you add all those up, and you get 625 square feet of that multi-sided pool. So that's pretty much how you do the surface area of the pool. So on this side, we have examples of the gallons of a pool using that exact same equation from the previous slide, like I mentioned earlier. For example, the rectangular pool, you see the volume, and you do your length times width times your average depth times 7.5. So since the average depth of this rectangular pool is, you take the shallow end, the deep end, and then you divide that by 2. So you get 6. 3 plus 6 is 9. Divide that by 2, you get 4.5 feet. So then you take your volume equation, which is the length of it is 20, your width was 30, and then your 4.5 was your average depth, and then you times that by 7.5, and then you get your 20,250 gallons for that rectangular pool. And then for the gallons in the spa, you do your pi radius squared times the average depth times 7.5. That's the original formula. So for this circular spa, the radius is 5 since the whole diameter is 10. So you do pi times 5 to the second power times 4, and then times 7.5, and then you combine all that together. You get 2,355 gallons. The easiest way to do these calculations is on a calculator. So now we're going to talk about the little turnover rate for pools. For most commercial pool, a turnover of the entire pool should require about 6 hours or less. Spas require 30 minutes, and then wading pools they usually do 1 to 2 hours. These requirements should have been met whenever the pools were built and designed. So to see if your pump is meeting these requirements, use this calculation on the screen here. For the turnover rate, you would take your pool volume, which we got from the last equation, and then you just divide that by your flow rate, and then you divide that by 60 minutes, and then you get your turnover rate, which basically that's just the amount of time needed for the entire pool or volume of water to be recirculated one time. And then you also get your flow rate because the pump must function at a rate that meets the turnover rate. So to get the flow rate, which is measured in gallons per minute, you do your pool volume, which we have, and then the required turnover rate, which, like I said, the spa is 30 minutes, wading pool is 1 hour to 2 minutes, and then entire pool is 6 hours. And then you divide that by your 60 minutes, and then you get your flow rate. So for example, if we have a 20,000 gallon pool, and we divide that by 6, which is the required time, and you get 55.5 gallons per minute. That would be the minimum flow rate for that pool. So I need to make sure my pump is able to at least push out and circulate 55 gallons per minute. So when talking about facility maintenance, the first and most important thing is saving lives, right, whenever we're with water. Drowning is a possible issue, which is why it's important and really crucial to have life-saving equipment present, within reach, and visible at all times when the pool is open. That way people know where to access these, and if someone's looking around, if someone's drowning and they're in help and danger, someone can look, bam, there's a breathing buoy right there, you go grab it, or a shepherd's crook, you go grab it and help your friend out, or those who are in need. Another thing would also make sure that the pool area is safe for the public. If things go unfixed, if there's a crack in the cement, if there's broken chairs, anything like that, it has a possibility for injury, and the liability will fall on the pool operator it could possibly be sued, which we don't want that to happen. It's also important for indoor bodies of water to have proper ventilation, because high chlorine can release that gas surface, which smells really strong in the pool. So if it's poorly ventilated, it can lead to breathing difficulties in that facility. Other things to also kind of look out for is, like I mentioned earlier, the rescue equipment, which is basically the life-saving equipment. You also want to make sure the deck is clean and in good repair, such as you want to make sure your pool rails, ladders, pool lights, any loose fences are secured for safety purposes. And like I mentioned earlier, any cracks in the swimming pool or steps in the swimming pool ladders should be fixed. Open holes around the pool are considered a trip hazard, so they will need to be filled or covered. Faded and worn out dead markers, you can't really see these once they're faded out, especially if the sun is on them all day if it's an outside pool. So you need to make sure you always need to have these visible for the swimmers. And then any broken deck drains would also need to be replaced. And then as a facility maintenance who is taking care of these pools, you also need to make sure the equipment is in top-tip shape and it's not malfunctioning. This would include your pumps, your sand filters, and etc. and any type of equipment like that. And then you also, like I mentioned earlier, just make sure you have the proper ventilation for the indoor pools or spas. So now, like I mentioned, if you don't have any life-saving equipment, which is the most important thing, you need to have it. If you're not going to have any lifeguards, you'll need at least a shepherd's crook or a ring buoy. The shepherd's crook must have a minimum length of 12 feet, and the hook should be detached at all times. And then for the ring buoy, you should have an additional rope that can reach halfway across the longest dimension of the pool. So for example, an example earlier of the pools where it was like 25, the width and the length was 10, you need to make sure you have the rope where it can reach halfway of that 25 feet. However, if lifeguards are present at your pool, they need to have a rescue tube and a backboard. You should also file with us a lifeguard plan, and a first aid kit should also be on site. No pool or spa is safe if the drain cover is broken, missing, or cracked. The pool should be closed until the repairs are made. And if you have to drain your pool, if you don't want to do it because you have to drain your pool will be shut down and you will have to because of this unfortunately story. And they even passed an act about it called the Virginia Grammy Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act, which is a federal regulation. If you want more information, feel free to click that link there on that slide. Basically what happened in 2002, Grammy became stuck to a drain because it was cracked and she was unable to pull herself off due to its powerful suction. Due to this, she died from drowning. And like I mentioned, the real cause was because of the suction entrapment due to facility drain cover. This regulation's purpose is to prevent the drain entrapment and the gel drowning in swimming pools and spas. So that's why it's important not to have it cracked because someone can get trapped in it. And that's not good. We can have an unfortunate story like this happen. So that's why also the clear visibility of the main drain is always required at all times as well. That's why whenever sometimes we show up, we can't see the main drain. We close it because we don't know what's down there, and maybe your drain could be cracked. So now when you're safely storing your disinfectants, going back to that, you want to store them in a cool, dry, and dark place. You never want to mix disinfectants. You also want to follow all labels for use and disposal. And you also just want to look at the safety data sheet to make sure you're doing everything right. And whenever you're also going to test out, also make sure the testing kits and the chemicals are not old or expired. Also, to kind of further expand what I meant on do not mix is you don't want to mix chlorine with any other chemical, such as bromine or anything like that. And things such as like debris, algicides, alkalines, acids, or anything like that, because it could produce some spontaneous combustion, which we don't want that to happen, especially with the outside pools where you have them in storage sheds and it gets hot. If those chemicals start mixing and it's hot enough, especially in those sheds that don't have insulation, it could cause some combustion, which we don't want that to happen. Here are some aquatic risks. Also, this kind of ties back to your facility. Pools and spas outside must be protected and enclosed with a fence at least 60 inches in height. The gates must also be able to latch at all times when not under the supervision of an adult. And then depth markers should also be at maximum and minimum ends of pools and the sides, and they should be present at all slope changes greater than 2 inches. All spa pools must have at least one marker visible and a caution sign posted. And also, when we're talking about fencing, along with the gates, missing metal rods and fences could create holes for children to easily get into a pool area and can possibly drown, especially if they're just running around outside without adult supervision. So you want to make sure you're protected. Even if you think that gap's not big enough to fit in it, you'd be surprised what kids can do. Anything that's worth debating, that you're debating in your head, you need to make sure it's closed and tight to where they can't get in. So when we're talking about required signage for your pools, these two must always be required on site if your lifeguards are not there, which are your warning, no lifeguard on duty sign, which the letters must be at least 4 inches tall, or you must be able to see the sign from the other side of the pool. And then you also must have that the children no less than 16 years old shall use the pool without an adult in supervision or attendance. These two are must-haves. If you have no lifeguards, if you do not have these, it will be counting against your inspection and you can possibly be shut down. Personal regulations, these vary depending on the pool, the spa, and you yourselves, what you want to regulate, what you don't want to regulate. Some of you don't want pets around the pool area. That would be a regulation for you. No drinks, food, or alcohol is a general one that's popular, as well as showering before entering. But the personal regulations kind of vary depending on each body of water. But like I said, some examples are those. Another one also is like no running, no child's play, no rough play, anything like that. Like I said, the spa requires a caution sign. It usually always says something along the things of like elderly persons and those suffering from heart disease, diabetes, or high or low blood pressure should not enter the spa. Another one that's under the caution sign should be not used under the influence. And then long exposure can also result in nausea, dizziness, or even fainting, which is why some of them have like a time limit of 15 minutes on that caution sign. And then overall good pool operating practices. These are some of CDC's guidelines. They should keep owners or pool managers should keep daily record on forms furnished by the health representative, which is us. If you need the sheets of in order to keep the daily pool logs, feel free to reach out to us so we can get those out to you, emailed to you. That way you can have them always. These pool logs should always have the disinfectant concentration, the pH level, the TA level. And let's say if you're there only 3 times a week at the pool, and let's say you added shock on Monday, and we get out there Tuesday morning and it's high, we can see why it's high, and we can be like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Other guidelines from the CDC is to maintain proper disinfectant levels of all times. You have children use the bathroom before entering the pool, and you wash your hands also, please. That's also a big one. You also want to prohibit use of the pool for those with open wounds, snores, or known infections. And you also want to advise swimmers not to swim when they have diarrhea, as that can be very bad. For Healthy and Safe Swimming Week, the CDC usually focuses on a different topic every year. This year's topic is got diarrhea, don't swim. It's extremely important to protect yourself and those around you by doing our part. Swallowing contaminated water in pools, hot tubs, and splash pads can cause diarrhea. So it's important to protect yourself and others. So keep out of the water if you're sick with diarrhea. If you know it, you have to keep out of the water. Please stay out. Don't go in, because that will cause the pool to shut down. You also don't want to poop in the water. So please use the restrooms if you feel like you need to use the restroom. Don't be brave and do it in the pool. Also, don't swallow the water. You also want to try to take the kids, if you're a parent, try to take the kids on bathroom breaks and check diapers every hour. And you also want to rinse off a minute before going into the pool, splash pads, or hot tubs. If you want any more information, feel free to reach that website that is on the PowerPoint. It's also important to protect yourself and others because you can also get some other non-fecal related illnesses too if you swallow or just come in contact with certain things in the pool. Some of these include a hot tub rash, which is basically an inflammation of the hair follicles. You can also get swimmer's ear, which is infection of the ear canal. You can also get Legionnaire's disease, which is a type of pneumonia. You can also get hypersensitive pneumonitis, which is allergic elephantitis, inflamed lung alveoli from inhaled organic dusts. You also get metricillin, which is a superbug, which is difficult to treat, and it can be resistant to antibiotics. You can also have some other ones like plantar warts, athlete's foots, which plantar warts is caused by HPV and can cause hard and grainy warts that can be painful when these thrive in warm and moist environments. So that's why it's also important to have good ventilation inside. That way it doesn't become moist and warm inside on the floor, for example, on the tiles. And then here are some picture examples of these. You have your swimmer's ear, your plantar warts. You even have MRSA on there, which is a possibility. You also have your allergic conjunctivitis, and you have your hot tub rash. This usually occurs whenever the hot tub is very hot, over 104. That's what can happen, which is why we try to keep the hot tub temperature under 104. Fecal-related illnesses, some of these are examples of what can happen when the pool gets infected. Cryptosporidium, crypto for short. This is an infection of the bacteria, and it can burrow into the small intestine. It can shed in feces form, and this really comes in the feces. You can get crypto basically from diarrhea, which is why it's important to stay out of the pool. And this crypto can be fatal when the immune system is compromised. You also have giardia, which is an intestinal infection such as diarrhea. Another common one is E. coli. Most varieties of E. coli are harmless, but this type of strain can cause severe abdominal cramps, it can cause bloody diarrhea, and even vomiting. For young kids and older adults, they can develop even fatal kidney failure due to this. You also have this thing called a norovirus, which is a winter vomiting bug, but it can cause viral gastroenteritis, which can cause vomiting, diarrhea, and even stomach cramps. And then you also have hepatitis A, which is a contagious liver infection known to cause fatigue, nausea, abdominal pain, no appetite, and low fever. I won't read over all of the illnesses. If you want more information, you can Google these, but these are some of the more popular fecal-related illnesses that can occur. Even though you can contract all these different illnesses, some of the ones you cannot contract from a pool is MRSA, head lice, pinworm, and UDI. The MRSA does not survive long enough in pools with the balanced pH and chlorine levels. So as long as those are proper, MRSA cannot live in that pool long enough to where someone can contain it. It can, however, be contracted if someone is in the pool and they have a cut or scrape and you touch that scrape or that cut. Head lice, it's not transmitted through pools to like the water. It can, however, if the chlorine does not kill them. The way you can get the head lice if the chlorine does not kill them is if a person, rubs off their head with a towel and you come into a person with that towel or the hairbrush, for another example, or even if you touch their hair, you can contract a head lice. But a pinworm is basically a parasitic worm that lives in the colon and rectum. These can be swallowed, especially by younger kids, so be careful, because these can live in the pool. As the chlorine cannot kill the eggs, but by having them in thousands of gallons of water makes the chance of infection unlikely. And then UTI with cystitis, it's a urinary infection. So as it is an infection of the inflammation, as it is an inflammation of the bladder. Women are more prone than men to get them. So if you're wearing a tight bathing suit, it can increase that risk of you developing a UDI, especially if you're sensitive in the genital area. If your pool ends up being contaminated, here's how you can handle that contaminated material. The first thing you want to do is protect yourself by wearing a rubber glove, and you want to remove any excess contaminant material. You want to disinfect all the surfaces that the contamination may have touched. You want to follow regulatory guidelines when disposing of the contaminated material, and you also want to wash your hands thoroughly. It's important not to vacuum fecal or contaminated material, as this can actually cause it to spread out even more throughout the pool. So do not vacuum anything that is fecal or contaminated material related in your pool. Also, another thing is you want to do, when you're talking about contaminated material, visible dirt on the bottom of a regulated pool or spa or any visible scum or floating matter shall be removed every 24 hours or more frequently as required. So I get it that outside pools, there's leaves, there's trees, there's sticks, there's stuff around it, but you can't just leave it sitting in the pool for 2 to 3 days at a time. You got to clean it regularly to ensure the safety of those in the water. Now, when we talk about a response for a vomit or a formed stool, here's how you respond to that if someone points it out and you are notified of it. We, the city, have a section city code, and we have these handouts dealing with this specific type of response for vomit and formed stool. And we also have the steps for it. If you need copies, feel free to reach out. We can get those mailed out to you or emailed to you. We can even get them to you in person. But the fecal and vomit accident report, you must make copies of this form when filling out, and you must fill it out when such accidents happen in the water. And then you must also notify us or return it to environmental health. This response form should also be kept with your daily pool records. But how do you do that, though? So how do you actually respond to the vomit and formed stool? You maintain the pH between a level of 7.2 and 7.5, and you raise the chlorine level to at least a 2. For approximately 30 minutes, you leave it in those ranges, and then you can open the pool back up to normal activities. And then after that, you want to submit your fecal and vomit accidental report to us at Environmental Health. Now, when it comes to diarrhea, that's a totally different ballgame, as this is more strict. It is recommended that you at least keep the pool remain for at least 12 and a half hours to 24 hours in accordance with the city code. How do you respond to diarrhea? Well, you want to maintain the pH level at about the same for you as you would for fecal and a formed stool at a 7.2 to 7.5. However, for when it's a diarrhea, you want to raise the chlorine level to a 20 parts per million, and you want to maintain this level for at least 8 hours to make sure you it gives enough time to circulate the whole pool and kill any bacteria that is in there, or any diseases or anything that could spread in there. After 8 hours, you want to backwash the filters to waste, and then you want to reduce the chlorine back to normal operating ranges. And then you want to submit the fecal and vomit accident report, and you want to call us here at Environmental Health, as it is mandatory that we are notified. Any type of accident like this, as an inspection will have to take place before you reopen the pool. This is an example of a sheet of what the pool operating log looks like. You want to put in anything that's in the daily operating log, such as safety inspection, water testing, fecal response, and cleaning. These are also the records that will be kept with this. A lot of the reasons violations happened last year is because a lot of people weren't keeping daily records current or at all. Some of them would be from 2021. So these records should be checked daily and recorded daily, and the alkalinity should be tested at least once a week. If you happen to have a pool service contractor that only comes out on certain dates, there should be someone else in the placement to supplement the other days that they're not there to check. The chemicals such as chlorine and pH need to be checked, like I said, at least once a day, and the alkalinity at least once a week. And we need to have access to those records. So if you keep them online, which a lot of people have been trying to do and kind of transitioning over, you need to make sure we have access to those records either upon request or you can send them to us. We need to see those records and have access to them. If not, it'll be counted against you in the inspection. Another things to kind of keep a reminder about is no pool can operate without a valid license issued by the city, and the pool manager operating that pool should at least be 18 years of age. You also want to keep a copy of the facility license. It costs us about $250 to get a duplicated printed copy. So that should also usually be kept with the daily records. And you also remember that pool licenses expire annually. So if you want to either resubmit that pool application and the payment in a timely manner to make sure it doesn't expire, then you're left some time without that license. The city inspections is kind of what we're doing here at the city. This, as you guys can see here, is the form of what we look like. When we go out there, what we inspect is the access to the pool. Okay, is the gate locked? Can anyone walk in? Is it secure? We also want to make sure we can see the bottom and the water's clear. And we also want to make sure the chemistry for the chlorine levels are good to go in the working range. We also want to make sure that the proper signage is up, such as like the no lifeguard required and the no one under the age of 16. We need to make sure those are up and properly visible. They can't be hidden behind a tree. We also make sure that life-saving equipment is out there and present and available within reach. We also want to make sure there's no condensation in indoor facilities, and we want to make sure the temperature is also within the range for the spas. We also want to make sure that the safety conditions are well within regulation within the facility, and we also want to make sure that there's hand soap in the bathrooms, and that your license and daily records are up to date and are being regularly kept. So the reason for an inspection, we just show up, such as routine open for business, or we show up if a complaint was received, which if a complaint was received, it just depends on the inspector. Me, I'll usually probably be like, hey, I had a complaint for this. This is what I'm checking for. Specifically, even though I'm going to go over everything for the inspection, but specifically I'm going to check for that complaint. Be like, okay, this is why I'm out here. This is an example of a complaint or a routine inspection. This was a pool, I think a couple years ago. It turned green. We had a complaint. We went out here, and this is what we saw. On the left side, you see that is green. And on the right side, you see that the main drain is not even visible, and it is green. When the complaints come in, we go out that ASAP. It comes to the top of our priority list. We're out there. We are required to inspect the pool no matter what the complaint was. We're gonna inspect it for you. Anyone that chooses to file a complaint can rename anonymous, and we will never give out, whether you decide to be anonymous or not, we won't give out the name. But whenever, like I said, a complaint is in, we'll go out there within a 24-hour window that it was received. So things wrong, like I said, in both these pictures kind of explain. There's no visible main drains, and there's also an algae problem. So that means the filtration system might have trouble circulating it, so that's probably be the first thing you want to check out. When all things considered, the reason people close a pool will be because of an immediate health risk that is present in that time of manner. Some of these include the gate not latching properly, water not being clear, the absence of life-saving equipment, no disinfectant in the pool. There's a safety or health risk, such as like a chair in the water, which is also kind of goes with the objects. Temperatures in spas above 104, and there's no lifeguard present when required. The pool will be closed if there is no one there that can adjust this on site. It will be closed. I want to just reiterate that if there's no one on site to adjust any of these problems that we have that are immediate health risks, the pool will be closed until someone is out there and able to adjust, and then you will have to call us back out as this sign will be posted stating the pool is closed. Once everything is back up and the working order, you can call us. We'll go right back out, re-inspect it. If everything's in good order, we'll open you back up and we'll take our pool closed sign down, as we are the only ones that can touch it. And then here's examples of some of the safety issues that can lead to the closure of the pool. Like I said, there's a lamp lily in the pool. It's floating in there. Your light, it will be closed. A little bit more clarity on the pool lights in the pools. If we can see wires, we're going to close on your pool just because it poses a shock issue, and it's an issue. It's a threat. The top left picture, the topmost picture, it has a gate not properly latched, and the bottom picture, the fence is broken, it's missing its latch, and probably missing some fencing posts along that farther side there. Finally, we're going to break down some city stats from last year. We have 455 city licensed swimming pools, spas, and wading pools, and other recreational water features. 97 out of these 455 are opened up year-round, and then 358 are opened for less than 6 months. Last year, there were 1,500 inspections done. 97.3% of these inspections did not require any closure at all of the pools. 48% of the pools and spas were in substantial compliance, which is less than half. So that means less than half of the times we were at an inspection, there is always something wrong with the pools. As 52% of our inspections were filled with violations. So that's about more than 700 inspections had some sort of violation in there. And then the top 3 immediate health risks for last year, for 2022, were no chlorine, as a lot of this was the outside pools. As we had a lot of weird weather, especially in the beginning of the season in May. We had that record like 13, 14 inches in May last year. And the weather really varied a lot after that for a little bit. Another thing is also high temperatures in spas. And then the other one would be the main drains not being completely visible. So those were kind of the top 3 for next year. I don't envision the bottom 2 for the high temps and the main drains not being visible. I don't envision those being the top concern this year. Just mainly like the chlorine and the disinfectants. So then a little final thing. What's new this year? The new lead inspectors. Me, obviously, I'm new. I was on staff last year. A lot of you will remember me from that. So now I'm just back this year with a more increased responsibility. We also have a new seasonal pool inspectors coming along. One of them will be named Cassie Adams. She'll be joining us on staff soon, hopefully. And hopefully for Memorial Day weekend, that way we can get out to your guys' the way we can get out to the city pools, city splash pads, make sure those are insured, and all the other public pools around the city. If you have any questions, feel free to reach me out at mviiela@wichita.gov. And there's a direct phone line to my phone if you want to reach me out there through business hours, particularly in the morning, as during the day we're out in the fields doing inspections. But thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, or if I talk too fast, or if you want specific forms or anything like that, feel free to email me, as I usually respond back at least once a day. I at least check it at least bare minimum once a day. So feel free to do that, or you can reach out to our phone number, or you can reach out to our department office, which will then they can relay the question or any information to me. But that is it for me. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a great summer, and let's have a fun time,